Our next guest speaker for today is Mrs. Lau Mei Leong, or as she is famously known as Mrs. Gan. Mrs. Gan is the SVP and Lead of Economics and Investment at Iskandar Regional Development Authority, IRDA. Joining with her today on the same panel is Encik Rudianto bin Azhar, who is the Director at Iskandar Rapid Transit, IRT. In this second session with IRDA, among the topic of discussion would be surrounding what are the key roles and responsibilities of IRDA in delivering growth and capitalizing on major government initiatives, as well as an outlook on Iskandar Rapid Transit. What are the major development projects planned over the next decade to capitalize on the potential influx of property buyers and foreign investment? So ladies and gentlemen, let's not hold this any longer. I'm sure you are eager to hear what our guest speaker has to share today. I will now like to invite and hand over the mic to our moderator, Ms. Loong Kok Wen, Regional Sector Head, RHB Investment Bank Berhad, to lead the session. Over to you, Ms. Kok Wen.
Thanks, Alia. So now we will have a session with IRDA, but let me just do a brief introduction on IRDA. IRDA is a Malaysian federal government statutory body tasked with the objective of driving various stakeholders in both public and private sectors towards developing Iskandar, Malaysia into a strong metropolis. Both the Prime Minister and also Chief Minister of Johor are the core chairmen of IRDA. So I'm sure Mrs. Gan and Rudy will be able to tell us what's happening on the ground and what has IRDA received so far. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Mrs. Gan. Mrs. Gan, over to you.
Thank you. I will try to share screen right now. Yeah. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So a very good, I would say we are still morning, right? A very good morning. Selamat sejahtera, selamat Malaysia Madani. Yes. So actually, I'm very glad that Muaz from JLand have actually started this presentation series. I think in the morning, sharing very exciting information. I mean, from I would say the people on the ground. So I think from my side, from IRDA side, we will look from the government perspective. So this is just a snapshot of Iskandar, Malaysia and Johor. So I think this is to give a perspective of where Iskandar, Malaysia is located. If you look at Johor Bahru, Kulai and part of Pontian, this is where Iskandar, Malaysia. So we are part of Johor in the southern part of Johor. So I think just now Encik Muaz talked about the approved investment. Last year, Johor received the highest number of investment, amount of investment of 70 billion. And out of this 70 billion, as he has mentioned, I think 50 billion actually are approved investment in the services sector, predominantly actually in the data center. So you can see now the surge of data center actually contributing a lot of the number in the investment in Johor itself. And in the latest number released by MIDA, I think in March 2023, actually, Johor approved project is actually 10.6 billion. This is up to March. So you can imagine December 70 billion, and the first 3 months, Johor received 10.6 billion. And out of that amount of 10.6 billion, almost 8 billion comprises of services sector. That means data center again. And with manufacturing taking a number of maybe 1.8 billion for Johor. So of course, Iskandar, Malaysia has a slightly lower number because of the manufacturing sector. So actually this will set the, the ground. I mean, if you do a comparison. So this is Johor, yeah? Okay. So when I talk about Iskandar, Malaysia, I think our key value proposition is our location. Location within the ASEAN and within Asia itself. So when Iskandar, Malaysia was established in 2006, we were the first regional corridor. So I think a number of you all have actually come over, especially if you are calling in or logging in from Singapore, right? Iskandar, Malaysia is just next to you, yeah. So our vision is to be a strong and sustainable metropolis of international standing. And the focus is actually to balance off besides driving economic growth, how can we balance between social equity as well as the sustainable or the green agenda? So there are various, how should I say, achievement that we have achieved actually in these different areas, not just the investment itself, but even in the area of low carbon or the sustainability, whereby Iskandar Malaysia has been recognized under the Carbon Disclosure project, ranked as City A list actually for a number of years, including the latest last year, 2022, due to our leadership and transparency on climate action. Yeah. So I think this is also some snapshot. Our area is 2,300 square kilometer and located just next to Singapore. I think if you look at the map on my right-hand side, we have like initially was a 5 flagship area, A, B, C, D, E, and now we have F. I think what was presented, I think in the Ibrahim Technopolis was actually located in our area F. And as Scotland have mentioned earlier on, we are established under the Act of Government. So we actually, in a way, federal government, because our funding comes from federal, and working very closely with the state government, because as our core chair is actually the Prime Minister as well as the Chief Minister of Johor. So the key role of Iskandar or IRDA is actually rests into 3 areas, which is to plan, to promote, and to facilitate. Because I think when you have investment coming in, the facilitation actually play a very important role. Okay. So this is a general view of the overall performance target. I think earlier on I mentioned when we drive economic growth, we must ensure that this growth is being enjoyed by the rest of the people, the community as well. And we need to balance between economic, social inclusion as well as resource optimization. So some of our target and some of our achievement I share on this slide. Up to December last year, we have received a committed investment of 376 billion. And this will give a GDP maybe of 49,000 per capita. And we have actually, in our comprehensive development plan, we have a investment target of 383 billion, which we actually achieved in February this year. That plan was up to 2025. And we actually have launched our Comprehensive Development Plan 3, which was launched on the 10th of August. And it has actually raised our investment target to 636 billion. So it's a very high target, and we hope that with good collaboration with stakeholders, private stakeholders as well as government stakeholders, we can achieve that investment number. And of course, we are also creating the employment and increasing the household income. But interestingly, actually, what I want to share is actually our target for greenhouse gas emission intensity. The latest number that we have is actually a 19.7% reduction based on our with a base year of 2010. But we have a target to have a 70% reduction in GHG emission intensity by 2025. So actually, this is a very high target. Yeah. Okay. So these are the investment update. I think just now I shared that was the December number, and this is the latest number up to June. The total recorded or committed investment is 391 billion. Yeah, out of which I think the realized investment is the realized investment is 234 billion, out of which domestic investment, actually one of our driver, is actually at 57%. And promoted sector is at 40%. Yeah. So if you look at the different sectors that we're looking at, I think the breakdown, under promoted sector, we're looking at manufacturing and our 6 services sector, which is logistics, tourism, healthcare, education, finance, and creative. And of course, in the other sectors that we look at is actually like the mixed development, residential property, industrial property, government, utility, and emerging tech, and so forth. We actually, in our promoted sector, we do not, how should I say, residential or property sector is not within our promoted sector actually, but we look at it as an enabler, because if the market confidence is good, the developer will come in. And if in the three segment of the development on mixed development, residential, industrial, actually what we like is a very healthy growth in industrial property. I think if you come to Johor, you will realize that the standard of industrial property or the industrial park in Johor is actually a bit different, or maybe at a higher level as compared to those in Kuala Lumpur or in Klang Valley. I'm not so sure about Penang. I haven't been to Penang for some time. Yeah, because we are benchmarking the industrial park to Singapore itself. And we're also glad, I think, the recent announcement by EcoWorld to develop a new area for the industrial park itself. And even in that segment, we have I think AME have 2 listed company. We have also collaboration with now, last time used to be Iskandar, and now it's a joint venture between Sunrise and CapitaLand, also in the industrial property side, because the development of the industrial sector will help attract more investment, especially in the manufacturing and other area, into Iskandar, Malaysia. So if you look at who are the foreign investors that actually come into Iskandar, Malaysia. So this is cumulative investment. Our number 1 foreign investor is actually from China, followed by Singapore and then Japan. And I think in the other top, in the top 6 of the other, including US and Korea as well. So this actually, you can see that the basket of investment in Iskandar, Malaysia are rather mixed. And up to maybe 6-7 years ago, our top foreign investor is actually from Singapore. So China emerged maybe fairly not so recent. And even though the initial investment or the mega investment from China are predominantly in the property sector, but for the past 2-3 years, there have been I would say, a surge of investment from China in the manufacturing sector. Okay. So I mentioned briefly what are our promoted sector. In the manufacturing, we look at 3 sectors, which is the E&E, petrochem and oleochem, food and agro processing. And in the services sector, we look at logistics, tourism, financial and business services, healthcare, creative and education. Yeah. So there are actually some strategic projects within the different subsector of the services sector. I think if you look at, I think the key investor in the services sector includes, like in logistics, the MMC Group, in Senai Airport and the Port of Tanjung Pelepas, of course in Tiong Nam as well. And in the tourism side, of course, I am very proud of our Johor Premium Outlet, which is the first, I would say, luxury shopping destination for Malaysia. Yeah, and of course the different hotel and branded hotel like DoubleTree, Renaissance, Holiday Inn, and we are also having the new announcement. I think Hyatt reopening in Paradigm, as well as I believe it's Sheraton, somewhere near Capri Hotel. Okay. And in the healthcare group, I think briefly, the earlier presenter Muaz had mentioned about KBJ. KBJ have their, I would say, they are Johor based. And we have Glen Eagle, we have Regency Specialist Hospital, Econ Care, and actually a growing number of medical devices invested. Okay, and in the financial business services, this is where we look at the outsourcing of services, including I think what we have like Okakichi, blockchain, Vistra, and so forth. So there are exciting things coming into the financial and business services. And in education itself, I think you will have heard of EduCity because it houses 3 of our, okay, in Malaysia, we have something like 10 or 11 foreign branch institutes. And Johor EduCity actually houses 3 of them. And besides the higher education, we actually have very good number of, I would say, international schools. Maybe can be comparable to the Klang Valley. We have something like more than 18 in Iskandar, Malaysia, and offering various, I would say, various curriculum. Of course, the IGCSE is the main curriculum, besides the Canadian as well as the American curriculum. Yes. And in the creative sector, you will heard of our Iskandar Malaysia studios. So they are actually, I think we have made some submission on the Film in Malaysia incentive. Actually, Iskandar Malaysia studio is actually a state-of-art studio, the only one in Malaysia that can actually stage, I would say, international production. So maybe there'll be some question about the changes of shareholding and so forth recently, but let me maybe assure you, we are back in business. We are still in business. Yeah. So in the manufacturing sector, I think when we look at it, the pillar for the manufacturing sector in Johor is actually our E&E industry. So the E&E, maybe I would say, maybe slightly behind Penang, but we have a very strong E&E sector in Iskandar, Malaysia. And this actually, the E&E actually create the foundation that can lead to what are the other new sectors or the focus sectors that we're looking at in the next 2 or 3 years. So some of the E&E sector actually provide a good ecosystem to attract higher value add manufacturing, especially in an emerging EV segment in the area of sensors and so forth. Yeah. So even before Pengerang is actually a bit outside of Iskandar, Malaysia. We already have a number of oil and gas multinational actually, and they're located actually in Tanjung Bin and Tanjung Langsat. And we also have a lot of the oil storage terminal and so forth. And in the food and agro sector, actually, because we do have a very strong investment, especially from Singapore, in the food and agro processing. And these are investment from like Super Coffee, Pokka Japan, Hershey's, and Guangchong. So for those, we all know the brand Hershey's. The Hershey plant in Iskandar, Malaysia is the largest Hershey's factory outside of the US. When we first started, we were second largest, and they have, I think, just have completed the expansion, and they also have set up their real R&D center in Johor itself. And some of the recent investment, I think you've heard of Paris Baguette or SPC Korea. If you go to Pavilion, when they first started, they were long queue, and we are still hoping that they will open one in Johor. So connected and embedded in these main promoted sectors are actually what are the areas like I would say the halal economy and so far embedded in this sector. And we also look at emerging technology such as the green technology and biotech. Okay. So this is some snapshot of some of the recent latest investment into Iskandar, Malaysia. We have Oliver Healthcare Packaging in the medical devices. So maybe some background. I think for the past 1.5 years or 2 years, we actually have the new investment, I think, Insulet, that do the Insulet pen and the ingredient. We have also the color corn that do the coloring for pharmaceutical, and of course now Oliver Healthcare Packaging. Actually, this help Iskandar, Malaysia to develop something what we call the medical devices hub, and this will also complement our existing Biocorn. Biocorn also part of the insulin ecosystem, also in Iskandar, Malaysia. And of course, besides this, I think recently we have the groundbreaking of EcoCeres renewable fuel, and this is actually the sustainable aviation fuel production in Tanjung Langsat. And I'm sure just now, the first speaker has spoken a lot on the data center and so forth. This is just one of the many landing of the data centers, regional data center in Iskandar, Malaysia. And the Princeton is located in Sedenak Tech Park. Yeah. So this next slide look at maybe some of the major government spending. I think infrastructure play a very important for Iskandar, Malaysia, and we have actually 3 main projects in infrastructure for transportation. I think first is the rapid transit system connecting Johor Bahru with Singapore. Target completion will be in 2026. Yes, and it will cover maybe some 10,000 capacity per hour per direction. Currently, we have the Tebrau shuttle that actually goes maybe like 36 trips per day. Yeah, so this will be a very important, a game changer for Iskandar Malaysia. Then we have the ETS, electric train system, currently under construction and expected completion in 2025. Yes. Okay. And last but more important is our Iskandar Rapid Transit. So for that, maybe I will pass this screen time to my colleague Rudy, and I'm sure Rudy can also add on the RTS or ETS, which are all, they will come together in a very important, I would say, ecosystem infrastructure to attract investment as well as to reduce developmental gap actually between the developed area in Iskandar, Malaysia, and the lesser developed area in the greater Iskandar, Malaysia, and in the Johor area. So Rudy, I will pass it to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gan.
Yes.
This connectivity is one of our major concerns, especially when it comes to attracting investments within and around Iskandar, Malaysia. As you may have heard, Iskandar, Malaysia is huge, 2,300 kilometers squared and all that, and the development is spreading outwards from the city center outwards into Pasir Gudang, all the way north to Sedenak, and now that the area on the west being opened up further with the completion of the bridge, yeah. So public transportation plays an important role to connect all these areas. Now, if you see here, the connectivity from Kuala Lumpur to Johor, Iskandar, currently being developed through ETS, and then from Iskandar to Singapore, we will be ready by 2026 through RTS. It's also quite interesting to note that the current influx from Singapore into Iskandar, yeah, the Tebrau shuttle run by KTMB has achieved its 100% capacity on the morning side. So because our train services from Iskandar to Singapore starts at 5:30 in the morning. So they will bring people who are working in Singapore. And then from 8:30 in the morning, services from Singapore will start coming into Iskandar, into Johor Bahru, the Bukit Chaga. Now, we thought not many people will be taking those trips, but over the last 3 months, the average capacity is 100%. Probably it's because of currency, but we would also like to believe that the economic activities are getting more and more interesting and vibrant within Iskandar, Malaysia, that attracts people taking the train into Iskandar, Malaysia. So a lot of activities now being done, as you might have heard from the Chief Minister himself, and we have a special task force chaired by TPM on the kesesakan lalu lintas on the tambak and all that. So that is our major. Now, within Iskandar, Malaysia, Iskandar Rapid Transit would be the backbone transportation. Can I have the next slide, please? This project, actually, the next slide is on the, yeah, that's the one. Yeah. It's a government-funded project for the infrastructure, 1.12 billion for civil infrastructure. This is a bus rapid transit system, as you can see from the screen. We will have a station in the middle of major roads. And these major roads are 3 major roads, and there will be 3 trunk routes. It will be used for buses. It will have dedicated bus lane. You might have seen this similar system in Australia, in Melbourne, in Istanbul, in Jakarta, in Seoul, and a lot more probably in Europe. Now, in China as well. For the infrastructure, the government is spending 1.12 billion, and IRDA is looking out for partnership with private sectors on providing electric buses, charging facilities and systems amounting to 2 billion ringgit. This would be through PFI, contract for service and all that. Now, the service of Iskandar Rapid Transit will be a combination of trunk routes. Yeah, as you can see, the red mark routes there, together with direct and feeder services that will cover around 1,600 kilometers of services. So 90% of Iskandar Malaysia area will be covered with IRT service. Can I have the next slide, please? My last slide. If you can see the one on the left, you can see the 3 trunk routes. The green one, it's a bit small. The green one will start from Anjung in Madini. The green will take you all the way to city center, connected to the RTS station at Bukit Jaga. And then you will see the red line starting from UTM in Skudai, taking you through Jalan Skudai, and also will be connected to the RTS station. The blue one on the east, that will start from Desa Jaya, or if you're familiar with the area, there's an IKEA there. Yeah, a total of 22 stations. We have tendered out packages, and the first one, the green line will start its construction sometimes in mid-October this year. Now, as I said, it will have an extensive coverage with all these 3 different services, trunk, direct, and feeder. 22 stations will improve connectivity frequency from 10 to 30 minutes. Now, the key feature is its connectivity to RTS at Komta station, with perhaps close to 600 electric buses later on. There will be a lot of adoption of green energy as well. Now, if I can end here, is that connectivity is key, especially the first and last mile. When we were talking to industrial parks players, we talked to property developers, there have been a lot of interest for us to provide end-to-end services. Therefore, there will be a lot of requests coming from these developers and partners to actually for us to start our direct services, especially from where the industries are, or connecting direct to the residential area. So this will hopefully serve more than 2 million passengers, 2 million people in 2030. And we believe that our service will definitely be connected successfully to RTS in 2026, 2027. Thanks, Meliong. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rudy. So maybe just to maybe if you realize that when we are doing this IRT project, we are also embedding a lot of the green element, because if this is going to be a government project, we want to do it right. So I think there are elements like solar energy adoption, the buses of using e-buses and so forth. So playing a role, which will take me to the next slide on how Iskandar Malaysia. Sorry. Yeah, how Iskandar Malaysia actually is play a strong role, I think, in the green and the sustainability agenda. Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, Iskandar Malaysia is actually the pioneer city in Malaysia to drive low carbon initiatives since 2009. I think in those days, I think when we have not heard of the terminology of what is low carbon, I remember the first time when I heard about it is actually in one of our collaboration with JICA and Kyoto University. And the terminology was low carbon society. It is interesting that how we have come from our first foray or first move into low carbon initiatives from 2009 and where Iskandar Malaysia is today. So as I mentioned earlier, I think for the past 3 years or 4 years, we have been actually recognized by the Carbon Disclosure Project Global Ranking City for ACT. And we have actually launched our low carbon city blueprint for Iskandar Malaysia and our low carbon climate action plan launch that involve actually the different, what we call the municipal council, the pihak berkuasa tempatan, so that we and in partner with the government and private stakeholder can move the green agenda together and in a better way. Yes. Okay. So what are the investment opportunities that we are looking at actually moving forward? So we have actually, I'm looking actually at 5 areas. We have heard so much about the data center, but I think more important is how can we facilitate the coming of new investment in data center, but in a more sustainable manner. So we are glad to see that in the Ibrahim Technopolis, there is the element of the solar farm and the solar farm, as well as the initiative for, I think, the hydrogen initiative and so forth. This is something that we like to have such element. And in fact, even this week itself, there were discussion on what are the planning criteria that we want to put in to encourage a more sustainable investment in data center in Iskandar, Malaysia. So next, beside this, we are also looking at, in the logistic industry, we're looking at aerospace. Actually, Iskandar, Malaysia, we have an international airport, privately owned, and we're next to Singapore. So there's a lot of what we call the opportunity in the aerospace ecosystem that we can leverage. So we are part of the National Aerospace program, I say by the under MITI. And actually in Iskandar, Malaysia, there is already company in the maintenance, repair and overhaul activities. And the announcement of AirAsia, I think capital A, to set up their MRO, actually will form as one of the other catalysts to drive this industry. And if you look at airline connectivity, I think we also want to bring, how can the MRO, how should I say, provide the services to these airlines that is connecting into Iskandar, Malaysia. Yeah. So the third area that we're looking at is actually the modern farming industry. How can we use new and modern technology to in modern farming itself? I think Johor is one of our, I would say, the food supplier for Malaysia. And even though a significant number of our food, vegetable are being sold in Singapore, but nevertheless, we are already having the farms in Iskandar, Malaysia and beyond Iskandar, Malaysia. So modern farming will be a new game changer. And earlier on, when we look at the healthcare industry, as I mentioned, there are already a number of new investment in the medical devices industry into Iskandar, Malaysia. So there is a potential actually for high technology medical devices or biotech to set up operation in Iskandar, Malaysia. This can leverage on our existing, what I said, the foundation of the E&E industry already in Iskandar, Malaysia. So the last the last area that we are looking at for new investment is actually in the EV industry. So this is to attract companies with the smart technology, battery and so forth to set up in Iskandar, Malaysia. I think there are a lot of talks about setting up the car plant and so forth, but there are already elements of the EV industry in Johor. I think through like Handal Indah, they already have started with the e-bus in Johor itself. I think Gemilang Coach, I think they are listed in Hong Kong. They already have the plan to do certain component in Iskandar, Malaysia itself. And I think Sime Darby tractors through Turbot, I think they already have already launched Malaysia's first electric terminal tractors last year. So there are significant, there are collaboration with regards to charging station with Gentari, and then this was mentioned by Jayland as well as Iskandar investment. So this will contribute, I would say, will build the ecosystem of how Iskandar Malaysia can actually play a role in the overall Malaysia National Master Plan. Yeah. And to continue to attract high quality investment into Iskandar Malaysia, we will need a strong ecosystem. Okay. So these are also some of the other sustainable investment opportunities, specifically in the green area or in what we call the energy, in the low carbon area. I think Encik Muaz from Jayland have mentioned about the National Energy Transition Roadmap. I think when the government announced it earlier, but without the NETR, I think everyone is very excited about this because we are next to Singapore, and there is the very strong potential of how Malaysia can position itself in the renewable energy area. So I think if you look at it, solar energy is one of them, and the investment in renewable energy not just contribute in the NETR objective and maybe to grow Malaysia to a high income nation, but it's also will work into how can we complement the new investment coming to Iskandar Malaysia, especially in data center. So some of the area of the investment opportunities we're looking at is pollution control devices or equipment manufacturing, area in waste reduction and circularity. In green transportation, I mentioned a little bit on how we can embed the element of green or environment-friendly production material into our IRT. And of course, the alternate agriculture and reforestation, as well as water investment. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, to attract investment into Iskandar Malaysia, we need to have a good ecosystem. So one of which is actually what we call the sustainable eco-industrial park and office spaces. I think, as I mentioned, if you look at our industrial park, we are actually at a very, it's a different feel, a different look and feel for Iskandar Malaysia and for Johor itself. So this is just one image or one of the industrial area that already in Iskandar Malaysia with green building concept, energy efficiency and renewable energy, ready built facilities, dormitories, security and so forth. And we expect actually, if new investors coming in to operate or to run industrial park, this should be the way. And of course, in terms of connectivity, I think Rudy have mentioned a bit on how important is connectivity and how connectivity actually can drive investment. So Johor is blessed with 3 seaports. We have 1 international airport, and of course, we have a very, very strong rail connectivity and so forth. Yeah. So this is Senai International Airport. So maybe just some brief before that. I think if you look at Johor have 3 seaports. We have Port of Tanjung Pelepas, we have Johor Port, as well as the Tanjung Langsat Terminal. So Port of Tanjung Pelepas has been ranked actually for 2 years in a row, the last ranking in 2022, as the 15th largest port based on the World of Ports ranking. And I think they have achieved like 10.5 TEU for container movement, and this is actually a good achievement. Yes. Okay. So at the Senai International Airport, I think the airport connects actually to different international area, including Thailand and Indonesia. And even today, as we speak, there will be a first flight from Trans-Nusa Airline to arrive in Senai Airport today at 3 p.m. So we are continuing looking at how can we bring new airlines into Johor. And of course, we have Singapore next to us. So a lot of opportunity there. And of course, the other system, I think Rudy have shared, the ETS, the completion of the ETS will improve the connectivity. And we have the RTS system, the Iskandar bus rapid system. And of course, the coverage of the high broadband or 5G network, which Encik Muaz have already shared. I think if you look at Johor Bahru, I think the coverage is there. Okay. Then we also have the other ecosystem, which is actually the SME as well as the talent. So Johor is blessed because we are next to Singapore. By the same time, it provides more challenges because our talent will be attracted to the non-favorable exchange rate against Malaysia, but favorable if you're working in Singapore. So there is always that push and pull factor. And this is where I think authorities, together with private share stakeholder, can work together on how we attract quality investment into Iskandar Malaysia, investment that can actually bring in can pay better salary or higher salary. But at the same time, at the local level, we do have a number of reskilling and upskilling programs, including capacity building, employment grant, and so forth, to help new investor or investment to defray some of their employment costs so that they can able to pay a good salary to the talent in Iskandar Malaysia. Okay. And of course, when people come and invest in Johor, they will say, where can I stay? Where can I what about my medical health care, and where are the schools and so forth? So we have mentioned we have more than 12 private hospitals, and a number of hospitals are actually accredited with the MSQH, which is the accreditation, international accreditation as well. And we have more than 12 international schools, 24 private universities. This is the image of the Newcastle Medical University in Iskandar, Malaysia, one of the 3 foreign branch university in EduCity. Yeah. And we do have very nice golf courses for your leisure. And we have good 4 or 5-star hotel. I think earlier on I have mentioned several names. And Johor is actually, because next to Singapore, we are also a shopping destination. Yes. So this will provide the live and play element for investors. At the same time, I think within Johor, we are also embarking on the smart city itself. So where we work closely with private stakeholders as well as the government on how we can put in the element of the smart economy, smart mobility, smart governance, and so forth in new investment as well in the infrastructure development plan. Okay. So this will be my last slide. We do have, I think earlier on I mentioned Iskandar Malaysia, we plan, promote and facilitate. So in our facilitation activities for investment, I think these are some of the services that we offer for investor into Iskandar Malaysia. We do have actually our immigration center, and we recently got approval from the federal government to process actually across Iskandar Malaysia the work permit or employment pass for expatriates, not foreign worker, but expatriate. And we do have a meeting every week. So in the past, if your investor actually have to go to Putrajaya for the submission and to get their documents and so forth, it can be submitted online to us. And we are closer on the ground in Johor itself. Yeah. And there are some 15% personal income tax for knowledge worker. So this is subject to certain criteria in Iskandar Malaysia. There are some incentive support package. I think we got the extension until end of next year for the approved notes as well as for certain location for a certain specific activity. And for frequent travel into Malaysia, we have our Malaysian automated clearance system. So this is actually an RFID to fasten or to hasten the immigration clearance into Johor. And we also have the Malaysian-Singapore Joint Ministerial Committee. And I think one of the proposal, actually they have several work groups that looks at how can we improve accessibility and bring in investment. And I think one of the latest proposal was proposed in this recent meeting, which was held in Singapore in July, is actually the special economic zone. I think Encik Muaz have actually shared some of the detail or some of the aspiration of the special economic zone. Yes. Okay. So if I should say, why should we invest in Iskandar, Malaysia? I think of our location or of the existing services sector available and the current strong investment momentum. So I think you can hear from Mr. Muaz, Encik Muaz as well as what we can feel on the ground. There is actually a very strong surge of investment interest. Even as we speak today, besides this online meeting with the co-host by RHB, we are actually having 2 physical visits by investment bank, bringing their fund manager to IRDA and to Iskandar, Malaysia. And this on top of the investment interest that we have received. So we are back in business and we're going to move to, I would say, a higher level to draw investment into Iskandar, Malaysia. So with that, I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Gan. Yes, those investment banks are our competitors. Okay, for all the participants, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box. I will pick it up from there. But let me ask the first question first before I move on to the Q&A box, the questions in the Q&A box. Yeah, I saw from your slides, Mrs. Gan, there's this 15% income tax rate for knowledge workers. Is this the same thing that our PM has announced earlier? And this is, I mean, that time it was specifically for the special financial zone in Forest City. Is it the same thing?
We will expect it to be the same thing or similar, because I think when existingly we already have the 15%, but it is actually for companies involved in our target sectors, you know, the 6 services sector, you know, and or some new sectors, and they must be, yeah. So it has a lot of criteria. For example, if how you define yourself as a knowledge worker, you have to be 10 years experience and so on, not just sebarangan anyone, yes. So when the Prime Minister announced, we would, how should I say, it should be aligned the similar, because we already have the legislation and so forth. But we need to have more discussion as to what are the sectors that we want to attract. It cannot be anybody else, you know, that is in my financial zone, you know, to qualify, because you have to be fair to, you know, to the current legislation. I remember last time when we first launched the 15%, then people say, hey, I'm working in KL. If I move to Johor, is it applicable? You know, everybody will ask, because they may get a new contract or work in Iskandar, Malaysia, right? Then income tax say, oh no, this will be erosion of my tax base. Because if you're working in KL, we are already paying income tax, right?
Yes.
So so the 15% is for expatriate, people who are coming into work in Iskandar, Malaysia, as well as returning Malaysian. So returning Malaysian, they have a definition. I think in the past, it was like, you must not be working in Malaysia for the past, I think, minimum 2 years. That means your tax file is not there. So we have to fight with Lembaga Hasil to say, hey, these people, if you don't give them, because initially the Lembaga Hasil said, no, I want expatriate. Then we say, what about, you know, the Malaysian who come back here? They doesn't have a tax base, right? So there's nothing to erode when I talk of tax erosion base. So we are expecting for the announcement should be follow similar line, but to maybe update or look at which sectors and what kind of experience are we looking at.
But locally, there are also a lot of talents, so we are paying a lot of very high income tax as well. So we have been marginalized.
I agree, but then income tax say, hey, my column, my pocket is like that. No, after if I give, I got no more. But we are telling them, you will attract more people, and these people, you know, never in your column, you know, so you shouldn't be. In fact, we've been talking to them and said, if you compare Singapore income tax rate, I think some of the audience may be from Singapore. You know, their top rate and their band is very big, you know. So you may earn quite a lot in Sing dollar and you only pay like 12%, you know. So what is my 15% compared to them? It's actually higher, but anyway, governments still have to find ways to get taxes, you know.
Right, right. Okay. Yep. Yeah, there are a lot more questions here in the Q&A box. I guess there's some of them is are the follow-up questions on data centers from the previous session. So first question is, how many more data centers can Johor take on with their existing power supply? Understand that data centers require a lot of power supply. I'm not sure, yeah, whether Ilda or Jacob is suitable to answer this question.
Okay, actually, yes, data center take up a lot of the power supply, but I think because we look at data center as a strategic investment, because I think there was some question to say that, you know, how many is enough, you know, and so forth. Just like we ask ourselves, how much data can we store in our phone and how much data we need when everybody go and take photograph of the makan lah, and travel lah, take bus stop and whatever things that we use data, and all this will go to the cloud. So unless we no longer use our phone, I mean, the demand for storage will be there. So data center investment will be coming in, I would say. So when you talk about the readiness of infrastructure, what we are glad to know is, I think different government agencies are working together to see how shall I say, how we can enable such development. So one of it is actually the availability of the power supply. So Tenaga is on board, and I believe that we have actually met with them together with MIDA to look at the new investment in order to supply for the new investment. So this is something that we also will urge developers when they themselves market for investment. You know, when data center come and then as a developer, you say, hey, I want to sell the land to them. You know, I think they're good for my branding, right? Please also take note of what is the availability of the infrastructure, because it's always how should I say it, chicken and egg thing, right? Because the investment in the Tenaga power line will take some time, but we need to inform and they need to know your plan. So if people just sell without recognizing, you know, so from the government side, we will say that don't give us the back end, you know, like, you sold already and I need how many megawatt, 100 megawatt, alamak, you know, because buying the power station is not like going to supermarket at IKEA and buy, you know, need a time frame. So the collaboration, and I think we have several meetings with chaired by the Invest Johor in Johor itself. I think meeting the different players to know and how we can coordinate this.
Okay, right. Next questions. Next two questions. Data centers do not have high multiplier effects on local jobs, meaning job creations. So how do you plan to address this issue? And the next question is on the healthcare front. The capacity has been there in Johor for many years, but yet, you know, demand has not caught up with the supply. So, yeah, how is IRDA solving this issue? A bit of difficult question here.
Yellow. Okay, I would think, yes, even though data center maybe on the surface doesn't have a high multiplier for jobs, because the investment may be billions, but maybe they need only 50 people, you know. But these are actually quality job. These are actually the engineers and so forth. It's not like, you know, my semi-skilled worker. And so I think we have to manage between the investment and the talent. But on the other hand, we can say that, yes, the investment come, they're, you know, data center is like a quiet investment. No, you can have a few billion investment in front of your house. You won't have car park problem because they only have 20 people. So you don't have, it's not like a shopping center in front, but the investment is there. So I can look at it from the positive point that I can release some of my high value job, you know, into other industry. So I will have my investment. They don't take so many jobs, but I can also bring in, let's say, other jobs that any excess capacity of talent, right? I can put in other places. So we look at it as maybe a meeting point. But we recognize we cannot be bragging like investment number in manufacturing. Oh, I bring in 200 jobs, I bring in 500 jobs, but we want to look at the quality jobs, yes. So I think on the question of the healthcare, you're right. The demand have not catch up with supply, but we are glad to know that I think last year there is an expansion by Regency Hospital. They originally have like 128 room or bed, right? And they have actually expanded to maybe to 300 over bed, double the capacity. These are private hospital. And I think Columbia Asia, they used to have one somewhere in town itself. They have actually opened another one near to Iskandar Putri, and they have also done their expansion. So the private hospital is actually investing into the expansion. And I think recently or 3 days ago, Prime Minister actually have announced an allocation of 500 million to upgrade or to expand Hospital Sultan Aminah. I guess it's always a catch up. Sometimes we ask ourselves, I think we want to position Johor as a Malaysian healthcare travel, to encourage more foreign people, foreign tourists, come to Iskandar, Malaysia, come to Johor. So that I think Penang is doing very well, Malacca to a certain extent. But sometimes we realize, hey, tak cukup bed, because the local people are really taking up. So the private healthcare doesn't focus so much on the tourism side, but we are working on that. So we're talking about local patient as well as foreign patient.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let me move on to the other questions, which is also difficult. So the government has just announced that Forest City is the special financial zone with some incentives, obviously. So how is the government going to implement or achieve that? Like, how are we going to attract some financial institutions over to Forest City?
Yeah, difficult question. Rudy, you want to think about? Okay, I think the announcement will be a game changer as well. When you look at the huge development in Forest City, a lot of money actually have been spent on the ground. I mean, if you have a chance to visit, I mean, you can see all the blocks. And one of the exco actually told me 70% all sold already. So, I mean, in that sense, yeah. So I think with Forest City as financial hub, we are the detail, I mean, the announcement came first. So the detail is in the works. So we are evaluating what are the, we are working together with the state as well as to what are the sectors they want to look at, So when you said we invite banks and whatnot, I think invitation of banks need a bank negara approval, right? So that will be something I think we have to discuss with the regulatory as well, whether should we look into banks itself when Malaysia have a lot of many banks already in existing, or should we look at different services that being offered? It could be fund management or something that is not the bank license, because bank license, digital license, whatever license is a huge challenge for us to attract a lot of hills to climb. But what about other area that we can look at? If you look at my promoted sector, when you look at financial business services, it could be sometimes some of the outsourcing area, because we know that the cost of doing business in Singapore is getting more and more expensive. And the rental is like, I think since the beginning of this year have gone up like 60%, So what are the opportunities that we can bring in within the financial segment? So may not specifically be a bank license or bank, but it could be certain area within that. Yeah. So when you did mention family offices, yes. So it could be something that, maybe because we are still working out the detail, it could be something that we can actually have a conversation, maybe with Kok-Wen or the team to understand better, what are the area. Because sometimes government doesn't know everything. We need to engage back, with the players. Yes.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, there's a question to Rudy. For this IRT, right? Can you say that the bus type used for IRT trunk route is similar to Kuching ART?
The trunk routes, the one that we are developing, will be a dedicated bus lane. A dedicated bus lane where it's not a mixed traffic. When you mentioned about similar to Kuching, I would imagine that the question is about whether we are using similar technology, is the ART. Now, in Kuching, they are using hydrogen fuel, hydrogen power. In Iskandar, we have looked at the possibility of green fuel, hydrogen and all that. We do not have the enough supply of hydrogen here, yeah, or green or blue hydrogen. So we are going for electric now. Whether it's going to be similar, yes, we are going for a high capacity fleet, the one that will take 200 to 150 at one go for the trunk routes. And the rest, as normal, we will also use smaller fleet, 6 to 8 meter buses to take everyone from the residential area. Colin, back to you.
Okay, yeah, follow-up question. Roughly how many packages will be awarded under the IRT?
There'll be 6 construction packages, already awarded 1. There'll be another 3 packages for common assets, and then around 6 to 7 packages for operations.
And what is the timeline for each BRT line to go online or to start?
Online, yeah. The first line, Iskandar Puteri, we will start operational in quarter 3, 2025. Yeah, July 2025. And then the other 2 lines will be in 2026, in quarter 2 and quarter 4, 2026. So that will be just in time to serve RTS people to RTS. Yeah. Yep.
Great. Okay. Yeah, then I guess the next question is to Mrs. Gan again. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. It's actually coming from me, the questions. I was told that most of the international schools in Iskandar, Malaysia, or towards the Tuas Link side are full. And you probably need another like 3 years to build a new one. So how should we attract Singaporeans to come over given the full capacity in education institutions?
I am very glad when you say they are full. We are very happy on that. I think there are still spare capacity because there are different international schools. When I mentioned, I think more than 18, right? I think last year Invictus International School opened. Invictus is from Singapore, located in Horizon Hill. And I think they have like 300 over students. So these are what we call, they have different tier of international school. And I would say that the investment in the private international school are actually very strong. I have Stella International School that opened during COVID, and they're actually talking to us and say, do you have new location? I may want to move in a bigger space. So actually it's good problem to have. And I think if you talk about the timeline to open international school, there are also a number of developers who want to work with, players of international school in order to, how should I say, complement their development township. So I think the minimum, if we include all the licenses, maybe within 1 year, we can get a new international school up and running. So it is not like a factory. You need 3 years or maybe a new PMU electrical power plant, 3 to 5 years. But within 1 year, I think we can do that. Yeah.
Right.
So it's gonna put, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Another question from me also. Do you think the government will include some goodies, particularly for Johor, in the coming budget announcement?
I think we are hoping for goodies. But actually the government also have announced already, right? Like 500 million for the hospital. Maybe the upgrading of the Senai Desaru, the upgrading of the Plus Highway, which is actually very good. And we are looking forward to goodies actually for Johor, because I think in the past 2-3 months, there's a lot of interest, a lot of announcement coming out from Johor. So I think we are expecting. So whether it is in infrastructure for roads or maybe certain incentive actually to enable more investment to come into Iskandar Malaysia. And even if it's not just the goodies, we can also hope that all parties can work together actually to how should I say it, to improve the ease of doing business. Because sometimes when you talk goodies, right, people will assume I want tax incentive, which is good. I want maybe reduction in assessment, which is also good. But sometimes some of the area is if we can give them a license faster, they can open door for business faster. I think this would be actually much appreciated. And this is actually an ongoing process. So not necessarily wait for the 2024 budget announcement and so forth, but it's an ongoing process. And if you realize the recent, I think in the Kulai municipal area or the PBT, they already have the Kulai fast lane. And this has actually went on to the Iskandar Putri fast lane. And I think Pasir Gudang is also implementing it. So the fast lane means some of the processes that come in, if they are located in a certain location within that zone or that locality, right, that daerah, then the municipal council can actually expedite some of the processes. And it is how we look at to complement what the budget will announce, but on the ground, we must, improve the ease of doing business.
So you are saying, like, let's say a manufacturer wants to set up a new plant in, for example, Kulai, then the company will be able to get faster approval process?
Yes. I think there are some conditions as to which cannot be, let's say, a small plot of land. I think like area like the Ibrahim Tech Park and one or two area, I think around in Kulai area, I think the Senai Airport City area, these are the developed industrial park. So I think if you have any new development of industrial park, please talk to either us or talk to the municipal council how to recognize you in part of the fast lane. Because in order for them to do the fast lane, they must also have assurance that the industrial park, have a good process as well.
Yes.
Yes. So it is a kind of collaborative effort so that I trust you, I have confidence in you to deliver some of the things so that I can expedite the approval.
Where are the other areas that you mentioned just now? Kulai and where else?
Iskandar Putri, and I believe Pasir Gudang is also in progress to do the fast lane.
Okay. Yep. I have another question, which I think also very important to perhaps Mrs. Gan and Rudy together. How are we going to envision the change of landscape of property development after the BRT or the IRT and RTS come online? Currently, there are like 350,000 cross-border passengers every day, but only 40,000 that RTS can cover, and perhaps KTM another 40,000 for both RTS and KTM. So there's still some leftover. Yeah.
Rudy, your area?
Thanks, Godwin, and thanks, Jason, for the question. Okay. If I can add a little bit on the number of cross-border daily. Now it's about 450,000 trips. So one way is about 200 plus now. We are expecting now. Let's look at the number itself. Actually, in the morning peak, right? We are expecting close to 200,000, 170 to 200,000 crossing from Malaysia to Singapore. 200,000. That's morning peak by 2030. All right. So Jason mentioned about that 40,000 from RTS. That's true, because RTS is capable to take 10,000 people per hour per direction. So if the morning peak is like 3 hours from 5, 6, 7, from 5 to 8, or from 6 to 9, there's only 3,000. The congestion will still be a major challenges even with RTS. So therefore, our through joint ministerial committee, JMC, between Malaysia and Singapore, we are looking at improving the connectivity through bus services as well. Yeah, through bus services, we will be improving the crossing at Tuas as well. Now, if you remember, there were like talks about providing ferry crossing from Putri Harbour to Singapore. This is also on the table for us to discuss further with Singapore. So, ferry, buses, and trains. Now, yes, the brown shuttle, from the agreement itself between Malaysia and Singapore, will be shut down. But again, that is a new point for us to discuss further with Singapore, looking at the issues Singapore is facing. Like Mrs. Gan mentioned just now, the property market there in Singapore is getting, even the rental market is getting higher. The BTO market for HDB is even getting worse and worse by the year. So now, how will this change Iskandar Malaysia's landscape on property? I would say that we are looking at least 5 major market segments. Number one will be for the locals. With development coming up in Iskandar, in Madini, in Gelang Patah, in Pasir Gudang and all that, even up to industrial parks in Sedana, in Senai, the locals will need to have better connectivity, and what's better for them is to actually stay near the IRT, because they don't have to, it's just a TOD, a transit-oriented development. Yeah. The second sector would be for Malaysian working in Singapore. Yeah. With our network of direct and feeder services, they may be able to stay in their current area. Yeah. And developers may be able to put up more compact development. We were talking about even outside our trunk routes, places like Seri Alam, places like Seri Alam, and then places like Masai and all that. It will be well connected to the CIQ. Will be well connected to the airport with our IRT direct services. Now, the third market segment will be Malaysians who are working in Singapore. Yeah, those people actually will be benefited a lot from all these transit-oriented development. We are also looking at Malaysian in Singapore, working in Singapore, who are now probably they need to find a better quality living, coming back, staying in Malaysia. Yeah, as well as those Singaporean working there, they may be looking at Iskandar Malaysia for a better for a more affordable quality living. So in terms of property development, these are the potential market segments that we can look at. And now, for Iskandar Malaysia, I just add a bit, Mrs. Gan, that we have Perumahan Iskandar Malaysia, Prisma. Yeah, this is affordable, built for rent. Yeah, a rental kind of scheme for Malaysian, who are working in Iskandar Malaysia. If you are coming from Perak, Pahang, elsewhere, if coming here and you don't want to, you are still about to start your career here in Iskandar Malaysia, you can come to IRDA, rent our 2, 3, or 4 bedrooms, depending. So it's actually well maintained, really affordable rate for you to be here for a maximum of 8 years. So this will help these new influx of skilled workers, especially to be able to set up their career here comfortably. Yeah, I think Mrs. Gan, would you like to add some more?
No, I think I'm good. Yes.
Okay. Then follow-up question: what will happen to the current CIQ? So RTS at Bukit Chaga, there will be a CIQ there, and once you check in, you can just go straight to Singapore. You don't need another Q, right? So what will happen to the current CIQ?
The current CIQ, because there will still be bus services crossing to Singapore. So the current CIQ will still be used by buses and cars,
Right.
and motorbikes and all that. Yeah, but bear in mind, when Singapore starts to implement their electric bikes and all those restrictions, then therefore we are looking at a lot more people will be migrating to use RTS and buses. Even buses, if when the time comes, perhaps we will also be using electric buses crossing to Singapore. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Another interesting question. I guess everyone would like to know. Perhaps you can give us a hint on the pricing or the ticket price for the RTS.
I think this one, should be Rudy.
Yeah. There's been quite a number of discussion between Malaysia MOT and Singapore MOT, and the operator of RTS will be a joint operation between Prasarana and SMRT Singapore. So they will come back to us in due course before they start their operations in 2026, perhaps. Yeah. And have a look out for that.
So I think just for interest, right? I think the current KTM shuttle is 5 ringgit to Singapore or 5 Sing dollar, coming back. Yeah.
Okay. Probably just double.
Should be affordable. I read somewhere, I think Anthony Look was saying some of the proposal too expensive or something like that. It was in the public news. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's just handle the last question before we move on to the panel discussion. Where does the line decision drawn between state and federal interest when it comes to FDI agenda? Stakeholder quota have to be percentage of local or Bumi quota participation. What about employment quota limit? Both foreign versus local as well. These are part of the foreign or concerns for foreigners, foreign investors, if they are restricted in their business decisions. Yeah.
Okay. I think basically, if you follow all the FD, okay, if you look at the MIDA guideline, right, the restriction to foreign equity actually have been uplifted for the past 20 years or so. So if you are in the manufacturing sector, or you're in the services sector that is under MIDA umbrella, including MDEC services and whatnot, a foreigner can be allowed to hold 100%. I think even in some of the, I think only there are some sectors may be a little bit restricted, and I think even in their restricted also is like maybe a 30% Bumiputra equity, but they will be more on maybe the retail sector and so forth. So in general, I think the FDI landscape is we're rather transparent. I think in most sectors, you can allow to have 100%. Of course, you can say that sometimes, bank is very highly regulated. Your telecommunication, insurance, those are actually, because strategic sector, strategic asset. But otherwise, I think the FDI, they are allowed to have 100% foreign equity. Of course, some of the specific approvals that relates to state, let's say ownership of land. So if, let's say, you buy a piece of industrial site and you are manufacturing, so it's clear. Because you're under MIDA, you can allow to have 100% foreign ownership. You can own your industrial land for your development. But if, let's say, a foreigner want to buy agriculture land, this is where there is some hiccup. Because agriculture land is actually for, Malaysian, and we do not want to encourage foreigners to buy agriculture land unless they form a company and they have equity interest. So this is specific to certain industry. And I think sometimes, because last time used to have this FIC guideline, right? They call it the Foreign Investment Committee guideline, which has been replaced by the EPU guideline on foreign interest. So there are some specific condition, they say if it's above 20 million transaction and it doesn't fall into the exclusion list, you may have to seek the approval. But there are also a number of companies that come to IRDA for us to give the letter of support if they fall into our target sectors or in the promoted node or something. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mrs. Gan and Rudy. A lot of things, to share really. We are just running a little bit behind schedule. But let me pass the time to our MC Alia so that we can move on to the next panel discussion.